MCC recorders at light speed.
Nothing has captured our collective imagination quite like space. We have accompanied real-life heroes as they orbited the Earth and took us to the moon.
Okay, that agrees fairly closely with us.
But for the makers of movie magic, reality is only the beginning. These masters of visual effects have filled the screen with mysterious and enthralling images of the cosmos, astounding our senses in 2001: A Space Odyssey, expanding our minds in Forbidden Planet, and thrilling us with galactic adventures in Star Wars. Travel with us now through space and time as we recall our quest to conquer the heavens and witness the ultimate alien invasion in Independence Day. It's a journey across the universe with the masters of movie magic. So get on board as we blast off for the final frontier. This is the final frontier. Space. Since the earliest images of man's cosmic quest, no genre has so inspired filmmakers. No environment has provided so wondrous a stage for their stories. From generation to generation, visionary directors have collaborated with the premier artists of visual effects, always pushing the envelope of technology to tell unfathomable stories of fantastic frontiers. They have taken us to the moon and brought us back in Apollo 13. They have stretched our minds toward the mysteries of the solar system in 2001: A Space Odyssey. They have shown us our future in a galaxy far, far away in Star Wars. And they have always entertained us with riveting images and captivating stories of mystery and adventure in space. But in their pursuit of the final frontier, not all of the most memorable moments have occurred in outer space. Now, at the turn of the millennium, a team of filmmakers have brought what's out there to Earth in the epic sci-fi thriller Independence Day.
We try to deal with an alien invasion more like a natural disaster and less like some evil aliens. Our aliens in the film are neither good nor evil. They're more like locusts. They've simply come to move in and they're trying to clean up, and we're the bugs.
Dean Devlin and director Roland Emmerich's ideas were visualized by artists Oliver Scholl and Patrick Tatopoulos.
People have a pre-awareness of what spaceships are supposed to look like or what aliens are supposed to look like. So what you try to do is build on pre-existing mythology and then take it one step further.
To execute their designs, the filmmakers pulled together a team of top effects artists.
We did pretty much everything in-house. We put together our own model unit, our own motion controls units.
Yeah, this is a good size here. Let's see, it's going to go out over here. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Our own digital animation, and tried to do as much as we could ourselves.
Model shop supervisor Mike Joyce oversees 42 artists in the construction of miniature spacecraft and targets of their destruction, such as the Lincoln Memorial.
This is one of the biggest jobs that I've ever done that's ever been done as far as miniatures in Hollywood. So from that aspect, it was really exciting.
We have the alien attackers, which come out of 15-mile wide city destroyers, and those city destroyers come out of a 640-mile wide mothership.
The miniature attackers are made of fiberglass and RTV rubber, a silicone-based material. The windshields were vacuum formed from tinted Lexan, a bulletproof plastic. The models are then finished with chrome paint and 8 dyes. The intention and the result is a very alien-looking attack craft. For many of the effects shots, Devlin and Emmerich turned to their computer unit, housed at Pacific Ocean Post in Santa Monica, California. Digital effects supervisor Tricia Ashford leads a team of 50 computer graphics, or CG artists, to help bring the story to life.
We take all the elements from the model of the mothership to the computer-generated Earth and really make all the elements blend together so that they look like they belong in the same environment.
Once the models are shot in the studio, Ashford's team takes the film selects and scans them into a powerful silicon graphics computer system. Then, the computer artists manipulate the images, adding miniature footage with computer-generated backgrounds and finishing details.
It's really trying to mimic the real world and adding in imperfections because CG is such a perfect, sterile world. For the alien attackers, it gives us a little bit more creative license because, you know, nobody's going to sit out there and go, oh, that's not really the way an alien ship moves.
For an alien attack scene, the CG artists start with a live action shot filmed in Utah. Next, miniature photography of a destroyer is added. Finally, swarming computer-generated attackers and background explosions complete the scene. The resulting image creates a feeling of mass hysteria, helping Independence Day keep audiences on the edge of their seats. Throughout the history of the space genre, filmmakers have taken perhaps the greatest liberties in representing beings from other cosmic cultures.
It is indeed typical that you Earth people refuse to believe in the superiority of any world but your own.
Film interpretations often reflected where we were as a society. In wartime, aliens were to be feared. In times of peace, we were more inclined to trust. After World War II, we began to think a little more about our stellar neighbors. Who were they, friend or foe? In 1951, director Robert Wise and effects pioneer L.B. Abbott collaborated on the classic anti-war film, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I think something is happening.
Alien emissary Klaatu came to Earth in a flying saucer with his invincible robot protector Gort and a simple message: make peace or else.
But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
To achieve Gort's ominous persona, 7-foot-tall Lock Martin wore a silver-painted foam rubber suit and a headpiece of thin sheet metal.
Without you, what could he do?
There's no limit to what he could do. He could destroy the Earth.
Klaatu's saucer was a 100-foot-wide hollow shell constructed of plywood and plaster of Paris and painted silver. Two years later, in 1953, came a more threatening view of alien contact. Producer George Pal brought to the screen what may be the most famous sci-fi story of all time, H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. Art director Al Nozaki's designs of terrifying Martian war machines provided Pal with a dramatic visualization of the alien threat.
Al Nozaki wanted to design something different for the spaceships. Everybody had done flying saucers. And so he kind of came up with this concept of like a manta ray, because they're such fluid-looking things.
Based on Nozaki's designs, the effects crew built models 3.5 feet across and an elaborate system of wires to fly them. The result was an invasion of epic proportions. After a rash of post-war alien invader films, real-life advances into space gave the world a first-hand vision of the serenity of the heavens, culminating in Apollo-Soyuz, the meeting of Americans and Soviets in orbit. By the late 70s, Hollywood was ready to consider that non-human beings might be peaceful too. In 1977, Close Encounters of the Third Kind portrayed our extraterrestrial neighbors with beauty and grace. And in 1982, one stranded visitor actually became our friend. now, with Independence Day, the friendship is over.
I think ever since World War II, a lot of people around the world have had the fantasy. Wouldn't the whole world come together if there was an outside aggressor? And so I think the vision that Roll and I've had for this film from the beginning was to play that scenario out.
Whether their movies revolve around visiting aliens or humanity's ventures into space, Hollywood filmmakers have constantly reminded us there's more to our world than planet Earth. Of the 5 billion people on planet Earth, only an elite few have actually traveled into space.
T-minus 7 minutes, 30 seconds.
And even they have reached no farther than the moon.
10, 9, 8, we have a go for engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and lift up.
But the magic of the silver screen has enabled all of us to take cinematic journeys to the moon,
Red 6 standing by,
to the stars, and beyond.
Knock your spoils in attack position.
Pointing the way have been a handful of gifted artists who apply their vivid and often inspiring visions of space to film. One of those is Ralph McQuarrie, who began his career as an aerospace illustrator for Boeing. When young filmmaker George Lucas was seeking studio support to bring an epic space saga called Star Wars to the screen, he went to McQuarrie for help.
George called me wanting to know if I'd be interested in working on it and contributing some illustrations that would help him sell it to 20th Century Fox. So after the first meeting we had, I had an idea for 3PO and R2 coming across the sand.
Based on the original script, McQuarrie produced illustrations which Lucas used to persuade studio executives to back the project. But McQuarrie's contributions had only begun. There were hundreds of concept drawings and designs to come.
My main source of inspiration, of course, was George Lucas. George would come in and describe in a few words things like the stormtroopers. He wanted them to be in spooky white space armor. He said Darth Vader could be a dark, shadowy figure that flutters in on the wind with these robes and a large helmet on that would be like a Japanese medieval warrior.
Ralph's designs were certainly instrumental in getting the movies even made. And then they gave the movies a look, that was unique from anything else, that you'd seen. They had depth, they had design, they had a sense of grandeur to them, and a sense of wonderment.
McQuarrie began the design process for his Star Wars illustrations with a simple thumbnail sketch.
It's a way to organize a number of different shapes that you're thinking of where am I going to put this main figure and how's he going to relate to the wall here, and before you know it, you've got a little miniature picture there.
McQuarrie's pre-Hollywood career had given him the technical skills needed for the challenge of Star Wars. After working at Boeing, he took a job at Litton Industries, where he designed an innovative prototype for a spacesuit. At Reel 3, a Los Angeles film company, McQuarrie painted illustrations of unseen space for CBS News. While McQuarrie's illustrations were based on scientific knowledge of the heavens, his creative inspiration came from Hollywood.
We've got to signal him somehow. He'll shoot us down.
I loved the Flash Gordon serials when I was a kid. I saw them when they were actually being shown as Saturday morning matinee things.
Like that, and we're finished.
I thought they were great. I've seen some more recently, and I can't quite see what I saw in them, but I loved them then.
McQuarrie was also inspired by the artwork of Chesley Bonestell, whose astronomical paintings were featured both in magazines and films. Bonestell began his career in 1913 as an architect, and architecture would always be his first love. In 1929, he went to work for Joseph Strauss, documenting the engineer's construction of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. In 1938, Bonestel made the move to Hollywood. He got a job at RKO Pictures, where he created these background paintings for Citizen Kane and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Chesley Bonestel became the highest-paid special effects artist of his day, earning $1,500 a month. Then in 1944, a Life magazine spread of his planetary paintings changed the course of his career. Legendary filmmaker George Pal hired Bonestel to create astronomical vistas on a number of sci-fi pictures. One of the most notable was the 1950 film Destination Moon.
It is 10 minutes before takeoff time in the uninhabited desert of White Sands, New Mexico. Tell them to stand by for count-off and firing.
Destination Moon was the first serious science fiction film. I mean, no monsters on the moon or anything. It was about a trip of these guys actually going to the moon and the dilemma of how to get off when they're overweight. They've got to figure out how to lighten the ship.
We're stuck here. Who got me here? I didn't want to come. You can blame me, Joe.
The first time they're looking out over the moon's surface, they had this wonderful scene of this uninterrupted panorama.
The lunar landscape was actually a 13-foot-long painting by Bonestel, mounted on wheels and rolled past a stationary camera.
So there were 534 holes in the back here, and they had a light lined up with the camera for the stars, so the stars would glow as it went by. And it's such a realistic-looking scene.
At that time, little was known about space. Yet Bonestel's images still hold up today. Neither Chesley Bonestel nor Ralph McQuarrie were trained as filmmakers.
I'm not getting into that. I'm going to regret this.
Yet the creative genius of these two visionary designers has had a profound impact on the space genre, sending 2 generations of moviegoers into space.
Are you sure this thing is safe?
On a journey we will never forget.
Scanning the horizon in Moscow.
In the early 1950s, the world was taking a good look at the heavens. Travel beyond the Earth's atmosphere still existed only in the realm of imagination, but filmmakers gave us plenty of food for thought. Images of space from the sublime to the ridiculous. In 1955, sci-fi master George Pal and astronomical artist Chesley Bonestel collaborated on their most scientific film, Conquest of Space. The movie was promoted not as science fiction, but as speculation on science fact, and it accurately reflected contemporary scientific and engineering knowledge.
You can go back to some of those early books and movies and see how some of that stuff has now become reality. People were writing about it because it had been conceived of, and once it's been conceived of, then somebody goes on and develops it. There's a lot of cross-fertilization there.
In fact, Bonestel co-designed the film Spaceship with famed NASA rocket scientist Wernher von Braun. As technology began catching up with fantasy, the distinct line between science fiction and science fact softened. In 1956, veteran special effects artist A. Arnold Gillespie and art director Arthur Lonergan won critical acclaim for their work on Forbidden Planet.
Well, Dr. Morbius, my orders are to survey the situation on Altair 4.
Commander, if you set down on this planet, I warn you that I cannot be answerable for the safety of your ship or your crew.
I was really blown away by Forbidden Planet when it came out in the mid-50s. It was just a revolutionary new kind of space film that was really advanced and had a lot of great effects and scope to it. So it had a lot of strength to the story. It wasn't superficial, it wasn't corny, and it wasn't about alien invaders. It was very sophisticated.
20 miles. Look down, gentlemen, are you afraid? 7,800 levels.
Hollywood's monopoly on space imagery was about to end. 1 year after Forbidden Planet, in October 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by putting the satellite Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. That same year, Russian filmmaker Pavel Klushantsev released his space movie Road to the Stars.
The hour for which people have been waiting for centuries. Man's first flight into cosmic space.
When the Sputnik was launched, people were shocked and completely unprepared.
Here are the pioneers seen off by some of the thousands who contributed to the maiden voyage. Man is stepping into the unknown world with caution. This is a test flight. Today, the space navigators will spend only a few hours in space orbiting the Earth. Physical reactions during flight have to be checked, equipment tested.
Road to the Stars ran for 40 days with a full house. People were standing in lines to see and understand what was happening.
The signal ready. Only moments left before the start. Go.
As the world took greater interest in the space race, Hollywood became fixated on outer space creatures. In 1959, a science fiction writer named Ib Melchior made his feature film debut, co-writing and directing The Angry Red Planet. He had just 9 days and $200,000 to make the film. The movie's main alien was a giant beast, a hybrid of several familiar earthbound creatures.
The rat-bat spider crab was a creature that was supposed to be 40, 50 feet tall, but it was actually about 14, 15 inches, and it was a marionette. It had worked on strings, walked around and did whatever a rat-bat spider crab does.
Feel the fire-hot breath of a 40-foot monster as it reaches for you.
In 1964, legendary effects master Ray Harryhausen created H.G. Wells' lunar-dwelling Selenites for first men in the moon. Harryhausen achieved the creature's key scenes using stop-motion animation, the process by which puppets are moved in minute increments and filmed one frame at a time.
Gotta run!
For some shots, he employed a less sophisticated movie trick.
I had to break a tradition I had always frowned upon of having men in suits. We had children in selenite suits because I would still be animating with all the masses of creatures we had in that particular picture.
By the late 60s, the NASA space program was off and running, with 6 Mercury and 10 Gemini missions complete.
In addition, I have shaft and trunnion.
Okay.
In December 1968, television viewers watched intently as the crew of Apollo 8 became the first men to orbit the moon.
Up until that time, it was just another missile, another mission, another missile, another mission. But this was like science fiction when that one occurred.
In 2 short decades, human beings logged millions of miles in space, and the cinematic space fantasies of the early 50s
No, sir, I'm going straight up. First man into space.
had given way to the awesome realities we watched on our own TVs. In fiction and fact, we were on our way. While NASA was changing our relationship with the cosmos, a few adventurous filmmakers were revolutionizing the way we experience space at the movies. The revolution began in Borehamwood, England in 1964, 5 years before man touched the moon. Here, effects artists made a film so stylish and convincing that for many, it still remains the quintessential space film.
The one that everybody kind of accepts as the best and greatest example is 2001. The movie was made 30 years ago, and yet it still, even today, is a pretty accurate guess of what life might be like in a situation like that.
Stanley Kubrick, coming off the success of Dr. Strangelove, chose England as the place to film his grandest cinematic vision, 2001, A Space Odyssey. Among a handful of Americans on the crew was one of the film's 4 visual effects supervisors. Douglas Trumbull had never worked on a feature film before 2001, but he had worked as a painter and designer on documentaries for NASA. He had also collaborated on a large format film, To the Moon and Beyond, featured at the 1964 New York World's Fair. When Trumbull learned that Kubrick had seen the film, he seized the opportunity.
I called him and said, well, I'd like to go. I'll come over to England and work with you. He said, great, I'll send you a plane ticket, and I went over. It was a big experimental movie. No one really knew how to do it or what it should look like. It was totally different from any movies that had ever been made using normal Hollywood techniques.
Trumbull's system of timing mechanisms would evolve into what is now called motion control, where camera moves are precisely programmed by computer.
It was really the limitations of the technology which dictated the style, because we didn't have electronic motion control at the time. We could motorize, but virtually everything in 2001 had to move at a constant speed.
These limitations set the stage for the ethereal, balletic movements of 2001 spaceships.
We shot things over and over and over until they were perfect. I believe the shooting ratio in 2001 is over 200 to 1. For every shot you see in that movie, there's 199 more that didn't quite make the cut.
Then, 1 year after the opening of Kubrick's space epic in 1969,
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
people around the world watched as the first humans set foot on the moon.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Neil Armstrong's words catapulted the world into an entirely new relationship with space.
The wisest scientists in the 40s would never have guessed that we could have landed on the moon. That moment in time when we successfully landed men and returned them safely from the moon was a turning point in not only the history of humanity, but in the very psyche of humankind.
In 1971, Douglas Trumbull got the chance to direct his first film. It was an idea of his own called Silent Running.
I wanted to show that it would be possible to make a very inexpensive space special effects movie, and also that it was possible to make a science fiction or space movie that had warmth to it. The Mars probes and Voyager spacecraft and things like that had a whole different geometry and lightness and delicacy to them that I really liked, and I tried to use that in Silent Running.
All right, now can we please have it quiet?
I didn't know anything about directing. I'd never been to school. I didn't know anything about screen direction or continuity, and I just learned it as we were shooting the movie. It was crazy.
The strength of this production lay in something other than experience. To stay within budget, Trumbull included a group of visionary college students on his crew.
They were skilled at building models, they were skilled at drawing, they were skilled at photography, and to do these effects, you had to sort of have your hand in all those.
One of these industrial design students was 24-year-old John Dykstra.
We all wanted to do everything, but we got together and under Doug's supervision came up with areas of responsibility that we were best at, or the things that we were most talented at, and I think that that was what caused our efforts to be successful.
It was that kind of collaboration that allowed us to do a lot for, very little money, but to be able to brainstorm things and quickly find solutions to problems that made absolute sense to all of us.
Some of Silent Running's most memorable scenes occur inside the space freighter Valley Forge, with the film's 3 special drones, Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
The idea was to make it look like some kind of weird appliance, to not have a anthropomorphic face on it or anything that looked like a person in a suit or a head or shoulders or anything.
The drones were designed by Trumbull and were manned by 4 talented young bilateral amputees: Larry Wisenhunt, Cheryl Sparks, Steve Brown, and Mark Persons.
Okay, Mark, relax, baby, and watch your hands.
Thanks, Mark. Super.
Terrific.
Several years later, George Lucas referred to Trumbull's drones when conceptualizing what would become the most famous little robot ever. But Lucas would not find it easy to mount his movie. In the 1970s, Hollywood was shifting away from effects-heavy films.
Once I got finished with writing Star Wars and I began to look around about who would do it, how would I get this accomplished, I realized that there was no special effects industry at all. It had basically dried up. So I had to create a company in order to do the special effects on the movie, because I needed to deal with some new technology and new techniques that hadn't been done before. I figured I needed to get young, aggressive, adventurous type kids in there to make it happen.
Together, under the direction of John Dykstra, these kids developed technologies that revitalized the Hollywood effects industry.
Around the time of Star Wars, I was about ready to get out of the business because there were very few effects films being made. And so the first film that was there that I was interested in was Star Wars.
We took stuff from all walks of life. We brought together things from milling machines and medical instruments and took completely unorthodox approaches to the creation of this imagery.
I'm on the leader.
You can learn materials and processes, but what has to happen is you establish a style. And that style doesn't happen until you risk something. And that risk for us was that we committed to the completion of that work in time for the release of that film, no matter what.
Yeah! You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
It was very difficult and very exciting, and we were really surprised that the film turned out to be this big success.
In 1979, 2 years after Star Wars, television's famous USS Enterprise returned to its fans, this time on the big screen with Star Trek: The Motion Picture. In the last 9 months of production, director Robert Wise turned to Douglas Trumbull's EEG films, which had just completed Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and John Dykstra's Apogee films. Renowned space artist Robert McCall was asked to create conceptual designs, including the menacing biomechanical life form V'ger.
My job was to create the doorway to these universes. So the paintings that I did and the drawings all had to do with visualizing this bizarre, strange, unworldly object, vast in size.
V'ger was originally defined as someplace between 300 miles and 60 miles long. We had to be constructing it while we were shooting it because of our schedule. So one end of the room was blanked off with a big piece of duvetine, black curtain, where there were guys building, and on the other side there was a big room full of smoke with lights and cameras, and people were photographing it.
The Star Trek team created more than 500 special effects shots in 6 months, half as long as the time it had taken to complete effects work on either Star Wars or Close Encounters. In less than 2 decades, this small circle of effects masters revolutionized our perceptions of space, changing our vision of the universe forever.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
In May 1961, President John F. Kennedy gave the U.S. space program its biggest boost. With his directive, Kennedy launched a massive drive to put the first astronaut on the moon.
The President had just decided we would go to the moon, and as a matter of fact, we weren't sure exactly how we were going to do all that, because it's a very complex and challenging endeavor.
Cape Canaveral, 1961. It was a time of dramatic tension, tremendous ideals, and technological progress. All the elements of a good space story. "22 years later, director Philip Kaufman undertook Hollywood's first attempt to bring NASA's true story to the screen. The film was The Right Stuff, based on the novel by Tom Wolfe. Gary Gutierrez, whose storyboards were already guiding the film's effects work, took a deeper interest in the project, and Kaufman gave him the opportunity to supervise the visual effects.
I'd done a lot of in-camera, multiple pass effects photography, but I'd never taken on anything quite the scale of what this ultimately would be, which is somewhere around 450 shots in the movie.
One of the most challenging shots was a depiction of John Glenn's re-entry after his solo mission to orbit the Earth.
No one had actually seen the effect because it's something that happens outside the spaceship. So it was sort of up to us to invent it and to come up with a way of doing it. For the wide shots, where you would see the capsule coming from the distance and racing past camera, we first tested a small capsule.
To shoot the scene, the effects team threaded a wire through the center of the capsule and suspended the model between a cherry picker 100 feet up and the ground below. A sheet of clear Lexan protected the camera from the falling capsule.
We painted this whole end with pyrotechnic material. And once it was painted, we'd light it and drop it down, going at probably a 45-degree angle, so that it came down and smashed right into the Lexan right next to camera.
For close-up views, Gutierrez used a larger model and a technique they discovered while shooting.
We made a thin little vent all the way around the edge of the heat shield that would allow us to pump liquid nitrogen in, and it would come out on the edges of this and blow backwards in a stream. And of course, nitrogen is a white vapor, but backlit with orange gels, it looks like flame.
The result was a powerful representation of the real event. By 1995, the technology of special effects had skyrocketed, particularly in the area of computer graphics. For Apollo 13, director Ron Howard's main objective was photorealistic authenticity. So he turned to visual effects supervisor Rob Legato and his team at Digital Domain with finely detailed models, motion control photography, and computer graphics. They delivered heart-stopping images of real events we had witnessed many times before. But one of the greatest effects challenges faced by both cast and crew was portraying the experience of zero gravity.
I was intrigued by the challenges of the weightlessness. I thought that'd be interesting to try to solve. But it became a much more human story to me as I began to meet the individuals involved.
One of Ron Howard's advisors was Jim Lovell, commander of the real Apollo 13.
When we first got together in the pre-production, writing the scripts and looking at the sets that had to be done, I knew that the zero-G airplane was the thing to use if you really want some authenticity.
Known to the astronauts as the Vomit Comet, NASA's specially modified KC-135 airplane became the shooting stage for zero-gravity scenes.
One of the reasons why Apollo 13 is so great, because it was filmed in this plane that does the parabolas. It goes out over the water and goes like this and over the top. You get about 20 seconds of simulated weightlessness. And they film during those portions.
Listen, as you get a little better at it, just start practicing moving around and just think in terms of trying to get from one specific place to the other.
In the ground, if you relax, your hands go down your lap, and so they're still. In space, if you relax, they tend to kind of float around and drift.
Howard, the actors, and a handful of crew members flew over 500 parabolas in 13 days to shoot the sequences.
The actors in the movie are actually weightless, so they move just right. They actually are moving the way you would move.
The zero-G environment of the spacecraft is a very tough assignment. I think they have more time in the airplane in zero gravity than any astronaut up to now.
It's all about imagining something and then actually somehow facilitating its execution. And that's a fascinating process.
For both The Right Stuff and Apollo 13, filmmakers and astronauts collaborated to retell history in dramatic form. With them, we still celebrate John F. Kennedy's vision to claim the moon and tame the great unknown.
To my mind, space is the future of this race. In 500 years, people are going to think of, well, there's the Earth, and there's all these other civilizations, all these other places where we live.
When Stanley Kubrick widened our window to space in 2001, he also opened the door to the rapid evolution of filmmaking technology. And the pace continues to quicken today.
You know, we're seeing this revolution right now with computer graphics. I mean, it's just completely turned this industry on its head because computer graphics is a whole new art form and a better way to solve many of these problems.
Action.
One evidence of this is its dramatic impact on television. The children's TV show Hypernauts relies heavily on CG technology to blend live action and computer-generated images.
Acceptable. I will have my drones begin work at once.
If it's set up as if it's a shoot and the entire universe is created in the computer, it's almost as if you're staging the action and you've got your multiple camera crews there and you're shooting it.
For the show's out-of-this-world production designs, Ron Thornton looks to Steve Berg, who previously worked on Terminator 2 and Waterworld. He designed one of the most lovable characters in the Hypernauts universe, an alien pet called the Gloose.
We really wanted it to be familiar, but at the same time alien. So it has a lot of terrestrial qualities based actually on one of my dogs, who is just a total lunatic.
For scenes where the Gloose interacts with actors on the set, close-ups are filmed using hand puppets.
If you don't drop that in 2 seconds, I'm gonna let Gulai turn you into stew.
Well, I see you have found a way to make the Gloose behave after all.
I think he's got the words Kulai and stew worked out.
But the Gloose does most of its cavorting in the computer, and it has plenty of company.
Just a couple of years ago, scripts with this kind of content would have been laughed out the door, and instead, we were doing shows that have more shots per half-hour episode than maybe 2 or 3 of the most effects-intensive features I've ever worked on.
Without the computer, a weekly show like Hypernauts would be impossible. As technology takes us forward, the gap between what we can imagine and what can be produced narrows.
The imaging world, both technically and creatively, has become a place where masters must become students again. And the thing I think that's most amazing about this time that we're in is the requirement that we embrace change.
When I paint a picture of an astronaut in space, I project myself into that spacesuit and I become part of that picture. The more successfully I can cause that illusion in my thinking, the more successful the painting is.
If I were to set about making a device to make the ultimate movie, I think that it would probably be a failure because it isn't about the machine. It's about the person who uses it. It's about the motivation that that person has. It's about the collaboration that that person involves in.
It's about people who came from many walks of life, from aerospace, from architecture, from industrial design, bringing all their creativity and vision to space. In Hollywood, it is the masters of visual effects who best depict our quest to know the mysteries of space. They have opened our minds. They have made us believe. They have inspired us. They have changed our view of ourselves, our planet, and the universe beyond. And they will continue to be our visionaries in the relentless pursuit of the final frontier.